other discussions we're bringing you this morning. The National Council for the Blind, they've slammed the IEC's assertion that the local government elections were indeed inclusive. That's despite the development of a special voting aid for blind or visually impaired voters. The council says many voting stations were not trained to assist, despite assurances that they would be trained. As a result, many blind people say they either did not vote or the secrecy of their vote was compromised. Let's get you more on this discussion now. The CEO of Blind SA is Jace Nair. He joins us now via our Zoom link this morning. Jace, it's great to have you with us on the program. Thank you so much for coming on so early as well. I mean, the assertions from the IEC, just from what you've told us, they're completely different to the experiences of blind or visually impaired people, what they experienced on voting day.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Certainly, we acknowledge that at the level of the Commission and at senior management of the IEC, we've had several engagements leading up to this local government elections, and we highlighted the areas of concern and challenge for blind people to have the secret vote. The IEC indeed produced 2 universal ballot templates, just over 30,000 of them for distribution to the 23 voting stations throughout the country. However, during the Blind SA's observation of the special votes on Saturday and Sunday, as well as on election day on Monday, we had just over 53 volunteer observers throughout the country that visited over 200 voting stations. And our experience on the ground was to the contrary. We found in the vast majority of cases, particularly in Gauteng, in Tshwane, in Ekurhuleni, in Johannesburg, that there was no universal ballot templates available at these polling stations. The presiding officers confirmed that they were not trained on how to use the ballot, universal ballot template. They also were just informed that blind people will come and try to assist them. As a result, in Cape Town, in Free State, in Mpumalanga, in the Northwest, we received reports that blind people did not cast their vote because there was no secrecy to casting the votes. Others did cast the vote using family and friends or the presiding officer and party agents to cast the vote. In that instance, their vote was compromised because other people now were able to know who they had voted for.
Yeah, so and Jace, I understand that was the case for you as well. You had to ask a friend to assist you on voting day. You know, it's also an issue of trust, I suppose, because you're relying on someone else to make your mark for you. As you say, number one, the secrecy of your ballot is compromised, but secondly, you have to trust that that person has put the X where you've asked them to do so.
Absolutely. The other challenge that we faced is that you'd know that in many of the municipal wards and metros and districts, there were a large number of candidates. I had to listen to the PO read my ward list that had 25 candidates, and for my proportional vote, there were 46 candidates. Now, for somebody to remember the position of these candidates and these parties within a couple of seconds is not easy. And if you ask the presiding officer to go back to read some of the things, you'll automatically give the person a clue that I'm voting for party X or so. So the lack of providing a list in Braille or even large print for those who are partially sighted is unacceptable. And these were brought to the attention of the IEC. We had similar issues in 2019 and 2016, and these were put into a report and submitted to the IEC, and the IEC assured us that there was adequate training provided and awareness and sensitization of all the election staff to the needs of blind and partially sighted voters to have a secret vote. However, on the dates of election, this did not materialize. I'm not sure what went wrong with the IEC. We've lodged objections at several voting stations. The IEC has not made contact with us as yet. We have written to the IEC on Monday as well, and we're still awaiting a response from the IEC.
I understand, Jace, as well, that your members, some of your members also reported just the kind of treatment they received in some cases at voting station. I mean, it appears from what you're saying, from what your members are telling you as well, it does appear that on the issue of the universal ballot template, that there wasn't enough training given to those who were meant to assist the blind or the visually impaired at voting stations. But secondly, some of your members, I understand, reporting that officials were quite rude, asking them why they thought that they would get special treatment.
Absolutely. I think it possibly is a larger societal issue in terms of attitudes about persons with disability. But it was sad when people were told, why do you need to have a universal ballot template? Why can't you just vote by getting me to assist you to put the cross? The understanding of the secret vote doesn't seem to have sunk in with some of these officials. So there's a great deal of work that still needs to be done to create awareness, sensitization, and for IEC officials to understand why there is a need for secrecy in elections.
Jace, another issue that many voting stations reported, or many people reported from their experiences at voting stations, not only insofar as the experience of the blind or visually impaired, but also the fact that voting stations still, to this day, 2021, not accessible easily for people with disabilities.
There were several voting stations that I visited in Swane that had a large number of steps. In one instance, I think there's over 10 steps, and they were quite steep. So persons on wheelchair or using walking aids would have great difficulty in accessing those polling stations. I was also told that there were a number of elderly persons that was using walking aids and had to be assisted coming down some of those steps. So there is a need for there to be greater accessibility so that people could have greater access to getting in and out of voting stations. And I think the IEC must spend more time in doing universal access audits far ahead of elections, because we still have another 2 years or 3 years before we have the next national and provincial elections. And that is adequate time for the IEC to start planning to make sure that these kind of challenges are eliminated. Particularly that the universal ballot template training is provided to all IEC officials from national to provincial and at municipal level.
I mean, you know, it's a discussion you've been having with the IEC. The issues that you're raising now are not new. In fact, your engagements as Blind SA, beginning with the IEC as far back as 2009, and still these are the kinds of issues you're reporting. Has there been any feedback from the IEC about how these elections unfolded for the visually impaired, for the blind?
As I indicated, we've had this engagement, we've submitted them with reports, and as late as last week, we've had engagement with the IEC on Friday evening. Since this weekend, and particularly since the complaints that we lodged on Monday, we've not heard from the IEC. As Blind SA, we will be pursuing this matter during the course of today to inquire what has happened to the objections that we had lodged firstly. And secondly, I think we need a greater commitment from the IEC going forward that this kind of, firstly in terms of attitudes and behavior of officials on the ground, as well as the resources that
it's completely unacceptable. And as you say, Jace, it really is just sad when it comes down to it, because it's so important that all citizens must be catered for so that they can exercise their constitutional right to vote and to do so with dignity. Jace Nair is the CEO of Blind SA. Certainly very worrying reports